Welcome back. I'm Becca.
And I'm Bree, and this is Spooky Happy Hour.
Hello, 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 everybody that is watching
Hi.
and listening again.
We all hope that you've had a wonderful weekend. I'm glad that you're
Mhm.
joining us on this Thirsty Thursday. Uh,
Yeah.
what have you been up to?
Well, not a whole lot, as per usual, editing. So I haven't really been doing too much. Um, I finally, other than watching Destination Fear or Jersey Shore or The Challenge, um, this is just a shout out to another YouTuber. I can always put like his information down below in the description box. I follow this guy under Flick Connection. I am a huge movie buff, so he always has videos coming out, and he'll do videos that are just new on Prime, new on Netflix, new on Tubi. And Tubi, I highly recommend to anybody because it's free. You don't need like a subscription. You don't even need to sign up. It's free. They have a lot of the older stuff on there from like early 2000s, some random horror movies and stuff like that. And he did this horror movie recommendation. I think it was under the name of like, these are brutal movies. Um, and I was kind of piqued my interest. This movie that I ended up watching is called Killer Joe. I had never heard of it, but Matthew McConaughey is in it, and it's from 2011, and it's based on a play. So when I was watching it, I kind of forgot that it was based on a play, the way it kind of tails out. So it's a bit of like a slow burn, and then at the end a lot happens. I sometimes when I get really into something, I verbally say things out loud. So I was just like, "Oh my god, like what happened?" But I don't want to ruin it, but it is a bit of a brutal movie.
Mm.
There is stuff in there that some people might not like, especially with an older man and a younger woman. But the premise of the whole thing is about this family lives in kind of like a trailer park. The father and son start talking about how much they hate the mom or the ex wife, and they want to get rid of her somehow. And the son ends up finding out about this police officer who also kills people. And cue Matthew McConaughey.
Matthew McConaughey is this like police officer hitman.
Yes, yeah.
That's
And
different, and the fact that
very
this is a play is also kind of different.
very different. Because usually we always see him in like rom-coms and like gotta love like those ones with him. There's like a few of them, like the one with Jennifer Lopez. Love that movie.
Oh yeah, what is that? Made in Manhattan? Is that one? No, there is it like a wedding? Something about a
Yes.
wedding?
Yes, it's a wedding one. I can't remember what it's called.
Me either.
But this was very different. And the last thing I watched him in was True Detective, the first season, and he does play a different character. He is a cop. Um, but I really liked that first season too. But yeah, so in this movie, he's a hitman, and of course, this family is kind of living in a trailer park so they don't have money, and he wants his money. And the brutal part about it is he takes interest in the sister and the daughter of the family, and she's quite young. And yeah, he has fun with her. um, but yeah, the movie is pretty interesting, and I highly recommend if that is your type of thing. Not a lot of people are going to like this movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a big rating on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, but you know what? I kind of like take movie critics out of anything now. Like if you like it, you like it. You don't, you don't. I kind of stand by this one thing someone said in a horror documentary. It's just like there aren't like bad movies. They're either entertaining or they're not entertaining kind of thing.
Mm.
So, yeah, that was kind of like the only newish thing for me.
It's a good way to look at it though, like, not that movies are bad because
Mhm,
like, those that you have that are your favorite, and then
mhm.
you tell somebody about it, and they're like, "Oh, I hated that movie," or "I couldn't get
Yeah.
into it," or whatever. Yeah, we all have our own stuff that we like. I don't think that I would like it per se,
Mm-mm.
mostly because like I don't like the yeah, like the brutal stuff or the traumatic things or some stuff
Mhm.
that's really extra gory. I don't know if it's because I hear so much fucked up shit at my job.
True.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I wanna, like, expose myself to anything other than that if I don't necessarily have to, even if it's fictional.
Mhm.
So I might
Yeah.
get turned off a little bit by those things, and at the same
Yeah.
time, then we talk about things on here like the afterlife and murder and
Mhm.
all suicides, all of
All
this
of
other
that.
stuff. So
Yeah.
I might, like, fill my quota with the spooky happy hour being, like,
Yeah.
the most that I'll get into it, but I really love horror movies, and I haven't seen a good one, or that I would consider good or entertaining
Mhm.
in a really long time.
This movie isn't necessarily horror, it's more like thriller-esque. It's definitely brutal, just with some of the context within it. I think because I watch so many of these things, I am a little bit desensitized to stuff, um, just because the dynamic with Matthew McConaughey and this young girl, um, a lot of people aren't gonna like it, but to me, I can separate a person from their character. It's just like, it's Matthew McConaughey, no big deal.
Mhm.
Um, but some people might not be able to.
Yeah,
Um
if any of y'all out there have your lists of thrillers or horrors or any movies that kind of fit that genre, feel
Mhm.
free to direct message us or leave a
Yeah.
comment below and let us know. I'm always on the lookout for movies to add to any type of list so that whenever I get a chance, I can go ahead and watch them. Um, Speaking of lists, I have so many trips that are coming up all in this entire year, and the only one that's not necessarily booked yet is Vegas. Um,
Mhm.
my one of my best friends, I've known her since 2013, I wanna say. No, 2012. 2012, we first met, and then she moved out to Colorado with me, and she's still there now,
Mhm.
and I'm obviously back home in Pennsylvania, and I wanted to go back to Colorado at some point in time this year just because I miss it so much, and it just not, like, fitting into the schedule of things. You know,
Right.
some paranormal conventions are already booked, some
Mhm.
overnight investigations are already booked on my end, and she had mentioned going to Vegas, and I was like, "You know what? Like, in my earlier days, like, in my 20s or whatever, I would have been all for, like, nightclub hopping and staying out till 6 AM and
Mhm.
whatever, but, like, I'm 33, and I can't do that anymore, and I'm too old for this." And so I was asking her, like, "I didn't realize that Vegas had all this much, like, stuff to do outside of the casinos, the nightclub, the drinking, you know, the whatever." So I'm
Mhm.
kind of really excited to see like haunted stuff every time that I go on a vacation. If it's not for something spooky related, I have to find something. And of
Mhm.
course, I'll go to Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum. I don't care
You
what anybody
have
has to
to.
say. I have to go. Like, there is no way that I can be in Vegas and not go. So I'm pretty
Mhm.
pumped about that potentially. And I kind of told her, I was like, as soon as you book the hotel, all I really want is a swim up bar. That's all I want.
Mhm. Oh,
I
I'm
just want
so
to
jealous.
lounge and hang out and be in the water and get a nice tan and go up and get a drink whenever I want.
Yeah, like, I've never been to Vegas, but it has been on my radar for so long. One, because of the Haunted Museum. I know we have different takes on how we feel about the owner, but, like, if you're there and you've never been, like, everybody that seems to have gone does recommend it, like, just to
Yeah.
say you went there, and there's so many things, like, doesn't he have, like, Jeffrey Dahmer's, like, glasses in there and,
Oh, yeah,
like
there's, like, a whole serial killer, like,
yes!
exhibit, so
Yeah, and, like, the
to me it's
Kevorkian van, like, you gotta see that, be
mhm.
like, "Can I
Well, and I
touch
think he
it?"
has a Dybbuk box in there too.
Yeah, I think there's certain rooms you have to sign a certain waiver for. So
Mm.
there's that room, I think, Peggy the Doll, Bela Lugosi's mirror.
Mm,
And the mirror, like, really intrigues me because one, like, Bela Lugosi, like, that is super
top
cool.
notch.
And I think in that same room, there is that painting that, like, survived a house fire.
Oh,
There's yeah, and it's, like, of a child. It's a weird looking painting, but there's
naturally.
so many objects in there that, like, you get to
Mm.
see, and if you wanna pay, like how much is it? Like, 65 bucks to get in or something
Oh, is
for,
it
like
really?
I think so, for, like, a
Damn.
couple days. I was like, "That's not bad," but and then apparently I got Zach hanging out in the black house next door watching everybody on camera, so
I'm just gonna, like, wave to the security cameras whenever I see them, just be like, "Come on, come hang out." Yeah, I'm, like,
What
super pumped, but I don't know. Part of me, whenever I go and I travel, I'll have everything mapped out, like, time
Mhm.
I wake up, time I must leave, time I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z activity until
Right.
dinner, go out, go to bed. And part of me is like, don't do that. Like, don't even think about it.
Just
Just like be
relax.
spontaneous and whatever falls into your lap or whatever opportunities that you might have, figure out which one that you want to do and do it in the moment. And then that other part of me then gets super anxious and it's like, no, you're going to do all the things that you want and you're going to be like running from like sun up to sundown. If you all haven't noticed, I have a really hard time with balance.
Oh,
Because when I get
no.
super excited about something, or especially travel related or something that I'm really interested in, I just go full freaking force. So I have to, I don't know, I might just be like, you know what? Like, I deserve a weekend to relax, hang out, just see whatever comes my way. And I've never
Mhm.
really done that. So I kind of think that this might be the perfect opportunity to do it.
For all of us Project Fear fans, though, can you please wear your beanie in there when you go to the Haunted Museum? Can you please wear at least something? I think
Hmm.
when we had our last Tanner and Alex live, our TNA live, we were talking about that. We're all admit it, when those guys are drinking, we're drinking too.
Hmm.
And I think that was brought up, and we're just like, could you imagine if like a bunch of us just went to the Haunted Museum and we're all like decked out in our gear? Like,
This
would they
bus
let us
pulls up
in?
like a freaking field trip, and it's just all of us
Yeah.
in our gear,
Yeah.
matching so that we don't lose each other in between all of the
Yeah,
rooms
like,
all of a
"Where'd you
sudden.
go? Like, where'd you go?" But, like, Zach would probably just be laughing at us anyways because he's like, "Ha ha ha, I took all your money." So, it's like,
It's
"That's
like, "It's
true.
fine, take my money,"
Take
like,
my
it's really
money."
cool. We can't deny that it's
No.
cool. We can't deny that, like, his presence in, like, the paranormal world, like, got so much bigger and people got
Yeah.
so much more involved because of it, so even though we may not totally agree with him as a human and the things that he does and how he treats people, he can be entertaining and has made some
Yeah. Yeah, like, that's how I started finding stuff out in the paranormal world. It was from him. So,
I know I feel
now
like
look
the whole, like, millennial generation, like, has
yeah.
him and Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson to, thank for just, like, opening the
Yeah.
door and being on TV all the time, and now it's
Mhm.
just much more mainstream, and I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see Vegas too because, I mean, the cruise lives there, and
Mhm.
when they do go live in the Fear Club, like, they'll talk about all of the stuff that they end up
Mhm.
doing, like, on the weekend or if they get a break and they wanna go do something, so there's been some recommendations that Tanner's thrown out too that I've, like, written down so that whenever I do go out, that might be something that I just put on my radar to see,
Yeah.
so I'm
And
pumped.
I also found out about, there is I forget what it's called, but there is a pizza place in Vegas, and it is based on, like, horror. So, the pizza dough is black, and when you walk in, I think there's, like, a couple arcade games, so please check that out because I that is, like, on my list. There's
That
also,
sounds awesome.
like, a horror coffee, like, cafe shop, which is also on my list. And then, like, obviously Madame Tussauds, like, wax museum,
Mhm,
gotta check that out. And then, like, when I was asking Tanner about hikes and stuff like that, I was like, because that's, like, one of the things I wanna do there, because it's just, like,
mhm,
there's gotta be some cool spots to check out.
for
Um,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
and
so if
I'm
any of you have
jealous.
ever been to Vegas or you've been planning a trip to Vegas and you have
Mhm.
some ideas that I might want to go check out, leave them in the comments, message me. I would be very appreciative to have all of those. And it's so funny too because when I was thinking about booking this hotel, or like my friend's going to book the hotel here in a couple months, it made me laugh and chuckle when we were talking about the episode, because in this episode for the Statler Hotel, there's all of these different like new amenities and stuff that were added then. And then I think
Mhm.
about where things have evolved now,
Mhm.
and I'm making sure that like my list has like a swim up bar attached, to the filter, be like, this is what I
Oh
want.
my
And
gosh.
then, when the Statler Hotel was around, that was not something that anybody could, they were just like looking for a bed, looking to go to sleep. So it's funny how,
Yeah.
when I think of travel and all the traveling that I've done, to know that Ellsworth Statler, who we're going to talk about here right now, made the Statler Hotel, and how that kind of just transformed everything from there. So he was
Mhm.
actually born in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, which on 9/11, one of the flights, flight 93, had crashed into a field in Somerset County. So
Okay.
it's like maybe 40 minutes from me. So this
Oh.
guy was actually born right in that same region, but he didn't stay there for very long. He was actually raised in Bridgeport, Ohio. And then his family was living in poverty. And so at 13, he got his first job as a hotel bellboy in Wheeling, West Virginia, which is also not very far from either Bridgeport or here where he was born in Pennsylvania. And then after that, the rest is pretty much literal history. Like, he moved up the ranks from a bellboy to a hotel clerk, then to manager, until he went to college and he studied hotel management and bookkeeping. After that, he opened his own restaurant and pool hall. His entrepreneurial skills were widely recognized, and soon he accepted a position at the Ellicott Square building in New York to manage their restaurant. Just years later, he opened his first hotel in New York, and within the next 20 years, built a chain of hotels in 5 different cities spanning the East Coast. Originally, Ellsworth did not intend for his hotels to be so luxurious. He wanted the average traveler to have a clean, spacious room with their own bathroom, to be comfortable and affordable. A promotional slogan used at the time read, "A room and a bath for $1.50." Yes, you heard that correctly. Rooms were sold for $1.50 a night,
Oh, I wish.
right? That would be super awesome now.
Oh, I'd be so, like, rich right now.
I would book a trip every day if I
Every
could
single day.
if I could spend $1.50 on one night, that would be amazing. So as you can
Yeah.
imagine, popularity really grew, and then he
Mhm.
started expanding that hotel and into what we would even see as current hotels today. And he was adding more and more floors, and even the advances that he was said to make in plumbing during this time were so innovative that those techniques are still used in modern construction today.
Wow. And additionally, Ellsworth Statler is credited for originating the phrase, the customer is always right. He really was a pioneer in the travel world. Statler was dedicated to making his guests' experience indistinguishable from any other lodging adventure. The Statler Hotel bolstered amenities like piped ice water, a closet with a light, towel hook next to the bathroom sink, free stationery, newspaper, telephones, and radios. Buffalo was soon becoming a prominent must see city, and Statler saw an opportunity to open his second Statler Hotel. And this is the one the crew investigates in this episode, the 1 million square foot hotel. I repeat, 1 million square feet. This place is massive.
Massive.
It's so big. Um, the hotel interrogated its original designs with high luxury accommodations and services like a ballroom, 4 dining rooms, a lounge, tea room, cafeteria, swimming pool, Turkish bath, and a 24-chair barber shop across 18 floors. The Statler Hotel soon became the social hub of Buffalo, and in the true Statler fashion, Ellsworth bought the entire city block out. even his competitor's hotel to ensure that his would remain the most frequented establishment. Guests included Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and members of organized crime families. Wealthy individuals came to congregate for business and pleasure here as well.
What a badass move to buy an entire
Yeah,
city
man.
block and just say, "Oh, you're my competition. I actually have enough money to buy you out, and I'm going
Mhm.
to shut that down, and everybody else is going to come to my establishment."
Yeah, it's super smart
It's so
move.
cutthroat too, and
Yeah.
I think that there was a lot of cutthroat moves being made at the
Mhm.
Statler because, unfortunately, there's a real dark side here.
Mhm.
Suicides were completed so often here, not just one floor could be named the suicide floor, all of them are said to be the suicide floor.
Mhm.
2 separate hotel managers that lived and worked at the hotel both died of heart attacks on the 18th floor, which is I mean, that's
Weird.
pretty crazy, like, both of you have been managers, obviously not at the same time. You're
Mhm.
living in those quarters on the 18th floor because that was for hotel management to stay, and they
Right.
both died of heart attacks, just wild.
Weird.
Another employee had a tragic incident in the elevator where her arm was ripped off and then she later died.
Mm.
Natural and accidental deaths weren't the only ways that you'd be found bellied up. Turf wars, deals gone bad, and other mob related conflicts frequented the establishment. The meat locker in the basement was said to be used for whacking snitches and enforcing their authority. This often meant that those who entered there didn't leave, at least in one piece anyway. A secret tunnel system connects to the meat locker, and this could have been used to transport dead bodies. It was also said that alcohol was smuggled this way during Prohibition. The hotel continued on, and Statler met an untimely death in 1928, just a few years after the opening.
Mhm, and because it is so close to the Canadian border, of course, us Canadians probably got smuggled some booze as well, so no wonder us with our 2 4-pack of beers now, like, geez.
And it's so wild too because I didn't even think about that in terms of where it's located because I'm
Yeah,
sure that there's so much like cross section of even crime, travel, like
for sure.
smuggling, bodies or alcohol.
Mhm,
Or I don't think that like trafficking is a very new thing. I think we think that it's new and that people have been doing this, but I think that they've been doing it for a really long time, even like back into the 20s. So it
yeah, for
just kind
sure.
of, I didn't even think about that until right now that they were so close. They probably
Mhm,
did a lot of business across the border.
for sure. And then his second wife was named the beneficiary of his will and estate, which she continued on building other Statler hotels, some of which still stand by today in Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., LA, Dallas, and Hartford. In 1954, the Statler assets were sold to the next hotel, Conrad Hilton, at $111 million and referred to as Statler Buffalo. This houses an upscale cocktail bar and is open to book many events, including weddings, happy hour, history tours, paranormal investigations, and musical events.
The one in Pittsburgh, I don't think that I wanna say it's like the William Penn Hotel or like Omni Penn Hotel or something. It is pretty close to downtown and it's
Oh,
super swanky. I mean, looks like it's from the 20s.
oh,
Large
cool.
chandeliers, the even some of the tiling is like argyle almost, and it's really you just know that it's like fancy and you kind of feel like you're transported back in time. And
Hmm.
it always comes up on a list as soon as I'm like, oh, I'm gonna catch a flight early in the morning. I'll stay at a hotel in Pittsburgh or
Yeah.
whatnot. And they're like hundreds of dollars a
Oh my
night. Like it's
gosh.
as fancy, the price is just as fancy as it actually looks. And
Hmm.
so whenever I was reading this, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I've seen at least pictures, right? Like never
Hmm.
been able to afford to do it, but I've seen pictures of those hotels and if that is what it looks like then or like similar right to like what they would have had at that time, it would make sense why all of those wealthy celebrities and everybody else
Hmm.
kind of frequent in there. And because it is a
Yeah.
million square foot, it also makes sense that if you wanted to like get lost or do some damage to somebody or
Mhm.
whatever. Like, it's such a massive location that you probably could get away with whatever you wanted to.
Yeah, like, without a doubt. I love hotels that have that history though. They keep that look and they don't modernize it. Just from the photos that they were showing in this episode, that it still makes you feel like you're transferred back to the 1920s with the massive chandeliers. I think there's like a part in the episode where Tanner and Chelsea are like in this room and you don't really get to see the room. You kind of just see the background. You can see all of the lights lit up. It almost looks like a ballroom. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's what I
just
was gonna
like,
think too.
I wish like hotels still kept that because it is the charm of it. When we modernize everything, I feel like we lose that charm.
Absolutely, because then all of the hotels look the same. You know,
Yeah.
like, you think of a Hilton or Quality Inn or this or
Mhm.
that, like, it's the layouts are pretty much similar, the only thing that changes is, like, the color scheme and the
Mhm.
bedding and the sign on the outside. I feel like they're all pretty
Yeah.
much the same, and I you also get, like, an experience when you stay at a place
Mhm.
like that rather than just a place to lay your head for the night. It's a
Yeah.
whole encompassing experience, and also, you know, there are a lot of famous hotels that are haunted, most
Mhm.
likely because of the same experience that we have at the Statler. Like, it's so big, there's so much traffic coming in
Mhm.
and out, so a lot of different things do happen. So as you can imagine, each floor of the Statler has its own stories to tell, and spirits here really demand to be known.
Mhm.
Disembodied voices, EVPs, knocking, senses that your senses are feeling like heightened, shadows darting across the hallway, objects being thrown on their own. Those are the things that are most reported here. And if that wasn't enough, there's a haunted elevator with a mind of its own. Witnesses say the
Mhm.
elevator stops at floors not designated by the riders. The feeling of being watched is very unsettling at best, and the darker than dark shadow figures keep you company, and that's what makes this location full of nightmares.
Yes, but the star of this show is a spirit of a mobster named Frank and his victim, Kevin. The duo were discovered by a psychic medium, Christy London, who spoke to the crew at this little shop that she has. This was kind of like their little pit stop area before the pit stop area interview. She recounted several experiences of which came to the same conclusion, this place of murders and torture and everything in between. She even stated that she kind of like befriended a couple of the mobsters just from experiencing them. Um, and Frank also doesn't really like when you talk about Kevin, apparently.
Yeah, and it's crazy that I don't know, there's so many things that happen when you're investigating, like, when we get into I'll save the story that I wanna tell for the Hillview Manor episode, next season, but it's crazy when you can find out from the dead, when you're communicating with them that
Mhm,
some people may not know about or there might not be history to,
mhm,
and that will happen to me at Hillview Manor. It was like I was communicating with something, then I found out, like, who who the spirit was, and there was like very recent history of like this spirit being known, and
mhm.
it's just really cool. And so she kind of like debunks all those things, right? Like, oh, it's
Yeah.
not this, it's not that, it's this. You know,
Mhm,
she knows that this is what took place here and those are the spirits that are the strongest. And I'm really kind of when I was watching it back earlier, I was wondering if like that bias that we talked about before, like
mhm.
knowing that she found them, like, is that going to be your first number one thing that you think
Right.
of and that you're going to try to find it because you know that somebody else has experienced it several times? Because
Mhm,
there's not too much in the history in terms of like the meat locker, right? There's a lot of
mhm.
speculation, you know, that this
Right.
is where people came to be punished and that
Mhm,
since they couldn't just walk a dead body out, that they were like chopped up into pieces and thrown down the tunnel. There's
mhm.
not necessarily anything that completely confirms that.
Yeah.
However, like, there were a lot of speculations, like we said, so it's just gonna be really interesting to discuss what they decided to do.
Yeah, for sure, and with such a big location, like, you just never know what can happen.
I mean, you have to, like, prioritize too. with
Mhm.
18 floors,
Yeah.
something's happened on every single one of them. It's like
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to explore 1
No.
million square feet in like 8
No
hours, 10
way.
hours, 12 hours.
No shot. But, before we even get to the hotel, the crew, literally races on to the Maid of the Mist. They are by Niagara Falls, and the Maid of the Mist is a boat sightseeing tour where you get to go right down in there, and you have to wear, like, a little poncho because you might get a little misty. Um, Hilarious, like, when they're running Dakota's, like, filming, and you could just see Alex in the background, "Go without me." It's like
And I like how when they're on there too and they're getting, like, drenched,
yeah,
they're all the boys are making, like, the best of it. They're yelling and screaming, and then I'm, like, always thinking about the people around them, like, what they think
yeah,
is actually going on at that time. And it's, like, Chelsea's face when she's just like, "I think we have different definitions
yeah.
of fun."
What's fun? I don't necessarily, like, really remember this, but, like, I feel like if you're, like, from Canada, like, you always go to Niagara Falls and you're gonna go on this tour, and I remember seeing photos. My parents were good friends with, my dad used to be a police officer, and his one friend that he used to work with ended up moving to Niagara Falls, and they're like, "Hey, let's go see them," and they had a daughter the same age as me, and we ended up going on this boat tour, and yeah, like, there's, like, little me with my little poncho on.
Just as big as you are.
Yeah, yeah, and it pretty much yeah, it is what it is, but, I will admit the Canadian side's kinda the better side.
Way better. I've
Sorry,
seen it
guys.
from both sides. I think we were in, like, elementary school. I wanna say maybe 4th or 5th grade. Um, yeah, it had to have been in elementary school. We had gone up to New York for something different and then stopped on that side of the falls and hung out for a
Oh.
day, and then we went across the border, but this was before you had to have a passport to go to Canada.
Mhm.
So this is we're talking about, like, decades ago, and
Yeah.
we stayed there for, several days, and that was I think that my favorite. Yeah, it's like the Canadian side is way prettier. You just
Mhm.
get, like, a different, like, panorama of it, and it's just I
Yeah.
think that's, like, what makes it, you know?
Mhm. But, yeah, like, Niagara Falls was probably, like, 4 hours from, like, where we lived and stuff like that. I never really went there that often. It's just, like, south of Ontario. I never really visited that much, but Niagara has become such a touristy town, like, they've just, like, jacked up the prices, and depending on, like, where you're staying, they automatically, like, add a tip, and there's, like, controversy with that, and yeah, it's
Dang.
yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of that in tourist towns, or they
Mhm,
try to just, like, get as much as they can from you because you're gonna
mhm.
be there for the, weekend
Yeah.
or weekend, you're gonna spend it anyway, so it's not like you then
Yeah.
have a choice to do it, and I wonder too if that ends up, like, driving down the populations that come,
Mhm,
or if they just attract people that might be wealthy enough to wanna go, because I think of, like, the ski towns in Colorado, like Vail and Breckenridge and,
Candler.
yeah, like, whatever, and I'm just like, well, it's a cool place to go for the weekend, and, like,
Mhm,
we'd had friends that have, like, timeshares, so we'll just, like, hang out there, but everything, like, food and drink is super expensive, like, I would never want
mhm,
to live there because we would
mhm.
just go, and thank God it was, like, maybe an hour drive, like, at least to Breckenridge, um, and that's the only time that I would ever go. I'm like, "I'm not gonna spend hundreds of dollars when I live an hour away, but I can still take advantage of it
Yeah.
being right there." But yeah, no, I couldn't even imagine, like, vacationing there for a week because you'd be, like, taking my whole paycheck.
It's literally, like literally where I live, like, we're, like, 20 minutes away from Banff. Banff is, like, the more, like, you go to, like, Sunshine Village, and you go skiing, and, like, during the winter, it's, like, a lot of ski bums wanna ski and snowboard, and when I moved here, people are like, "You don't ski or snowboard?" And I was like, "No." It's so expensive even
Oh,
for,
yeah.
like, a day pass, and, like, where I'm from in Ontario, like, Blue Mountain is just, like, a tiny little bump. Like, that's where I learned how to snowboard, and I ended up having, like, not the greatest time and, like, smacking the back of my head and getting bruised, and I will not go on these hills. I'll hike up them in the summer, but still, like, prices are so expensive. It is expensive to live here. So maybe I'll get my American citizenship and move.
Do it.
Vegas Vegas does seem like it's a good time and a good spot to live, but it's warm
Hey,
all the time.
it is warm all the time. The heat is dry. It does get super hot. You get the desert feel, and you also have like mountains in the background.
Mhm,
So
that's the thing, and I would get so
nice.
mad in the winter when the guys would post on Instagram, be like, "Golfing, oh my god, it's so cold out," and it's like -38 Celsius here, and, like, we have to plug in our cars to get your, like, your block heater warm enough. Because if you don't plug in your car, it might not start, and I'm just like, "Guys, stop posting this."
Right. And I don't know what the hell that is in Fahrenheit. So I don't even know. I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
what that
cold.
would be.
It
But
is
yeah,
cold.
cold.
We
Super
and,
cold.
like, it's funny here, like, kids don't get a snow day just because it's cold, like, it's
Mm.
not a snow day, but, like, if it was Ontario, buses would, like, not run, and they're just like, "Oh, like, yeah, it's cold, it's a snow day," kinda thing, so it's very, very different.
Yeah, it's so funny to hear like your stuff and then like
Mhm,
have my lived experience from Pennsylvania like a long time ago and then Colorado's experience for me and then coming back to Pennsylvania like a decade later. It's like
mhm.
we all of these like regions are all so culturally sensitive even to like weather. You
Yeah.
know, like my friend that I went to college with, she has been teaching in a bunch of southern states, but she's in Tennessee right now and she'll like Snapchat me and there will be like this dusting of snow on the ground and she's like we got called off for the next 3 days. And it's like you could just go and like the snow would just go away.
Oh
So
my gosh.
it's wild. But Vegas I think would be like a fun place to live and Colorado was too just because the weather in and of itself
Mhm.
is glorious.
Yeah.
Um I think that that was probably the thing that I missed the most, to be honest. I mean, besides like, you know, my friends, the people that I love and just the
Mhm.
scenery and whatever, but the weather is I think is a huge impact here. And I don't even think that I like was as sick as often because there's not a lot of like allergens there
Mhm.
and it's just overall like a really freaking great time. But
Yeah.
speaking of sick in this episode, right?
Mhm.
Tanner does not feel the greatest. Dakota checks in on
No.
them and says like, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" Since they're like over halfway through this trip now. Everyone's majorly sleep deprived, but Tanner mentions feeling pretty under the weather.
Mhm.
And by the next day, they actually want him to go to the hospital and get some x-rays. He was coughing up some less than stellar looking stuff. And they've been in all of these really abandoned locations that have
Yeah.
mold and asbestos. So it was best that he went to go get cleared, and he did. So he came back and he was ready to go for the investigation. And part of me wonders if he wishes that he wasn't cleared because this was pretty scary.
This location just goes and goes and goes, not because there's 18 floors, but, like, so much happens, and, like, due to the size of this location, once we show up, like, they're like, "Oh my god," like, they're driving by it, and they're like, "Oh, looking out the window, like, this is it. This is the freaking hotel," and once they get there, they have to split up into duos. There's no way we can separate all 4. We have to stick together, of course, and tackle this massive building. So we have Tanner and Chelsea to explore the top floors, starting with the 11th floor. And then we have Dakota and Alex to head into the basement. And I always find it funny because, like, Dakota chooses the basement. He doesn't go, let's start, like, okay, you guys do the 18th floor and we'll, like, go midway and, like, work our way down. He's like, we're going to the basement.
Every
Like,
time.
every time.
And it's so funny because he ends up sleeping in mostly basements. So I don't know if
Basement.
he's just like called to them or he
Mhm.
just knows that eventually he's going to end up sleeping down there. So he might as well get
Yeah.
used to the lay of the land. I don't really know.
Yeah. It's so funny. He does it to himself, and I'm sorry, Dakota, like, it's your fault. It's all your fault.
I can't even pick like my favorite pairing because they do switch up, you know, the duos
Mhm.
pretty often, and I think that, like, when Tanner and Alex are together, they're, like, all business. I feel like they're very, like, focused on all of, like, the stuff that they're, like, capturing
Mhm.
or, most it's like, "Dude, dude, dude." Like, I think that they're
Dude.
just I feel like they're just, like, so much, like, business, and then when Dakota and Chelsea get together, it's that kind of playful banter, or Dakota will take it too far and she'll show up
Mhm.
in her sister fashion and like call him a name or be pretty passive aggressive, you know?
Yeah.
And I like that they kind of have those duos a lot, but I think that my favorite is Chelsea and Alex together and
Mhm.
Tanner and Dakota. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but like Chelsea and Alex are my favorite little pairing
Mhm.
because I don't even know if it's in this episode, but multiple times this season, she's very, like,
Mhm.
forward and direct with him, but also somehow just a tad passive aggressive, like
I think it's because, like, because of her personality is like that and he is so, like, sarcastic
mm,
that she just, like, every time he says something, she, like, bats it down and, like, turns it off. But, like, I feel like when Dakota, like, chooses to go with Tanner, it's like, "I'm gonna go with someone who's taller than me, who will, like, calm me down a bit and, like, think clearly on the situation." But then you put Alex and Chelsea together and, like, they kinda, like, do the same thing, but then it, like, cancels each other out, and then, like, they don't calm each other down, like,
oh, yeah,
she, like,
no.
screams and he's just like, "Chelsea!" And
Well,
then
in
half
this
the
season,
time
really, she's, like, running away from him most of the time that they're
yeah,
together, and he's like,
yeah,
"No, wait, stop. No, wait,
yeah,
stop." And I'm kinda glad that they weren't paired up in this
mhm,
episode because I think that with all of those accounts and whatnot, it probably was a lot more helpful for Tanner
mhm,
to be with Chelsea at that time because we see it as soon as they do split up and they go upstairs and she starts
mhm,
hearing all these noises, and for, like, the first time,
yeah,
I feel like she makes a real rational, like, explanation for what she's feeling, not like, "Oh my
mhm,
god, there's people here," or whatever
mhm,
else. She's like, "Okay, I think that the building really might just be old," because she
mhm,
hears all of these things, like, almost, like, dropping, and she's like, "Ah, maybe they're
yeah,
dropping from the ceiling, like, it's a really old place," and then it turns out that it wasn't from the
mhm,
building being old because as soon as Tanner says, like, "Is someone here with them?" They immediately hear this disembodied voice screaming, and it almost sounds like a complete sentence, and you had mentioned
mhm,
that, like, it sounds like, "Help me," and I didn't get a chance
yeah,
to, like, re-watch that part of it when you had said that, but it
mhm,
does sound like there's, like, a sentence, like, I know that they call it, like, I think, like, an unexplained scream, but I do think there are
mhm.
words there, and you're thinking that it says, "Help me."
Yeah, like, just if you turn up the volume, it sounds like someone saying, like, "Help me," kinda thing,
Mm,
just the way it was, but obviously, like, once you get that, like, sentence in your mind, like, it's hard to think of something else. Like, I find
right.
when they put what they think is up on the screen and you read it, that's all you can hear. Kinda thing, so sometimes that gets manipulated, but they don't know what it is, and that's kinda what it sounded like almost.
Mhm.
And then while they are up there, Alex and Dakota find themselves in the meat locker, which is in the basement. Here is when they decide to do a digital recorder session, and they believe they got an EVP, saying Kevin got killed. And it's almost like there's kind of like a space in between. It's just like Kevin got killed kind of thing. After asking if Kevin had a message for them. Um, you mentioned like you don't actually hear that though. But the crew thinks like they think that could be Frank talking to them instead. Like they're
Mhm.
asking kind of like, where's Kevin kind of thing. And
Yeah, it's
Frank's
like they
just kind of
went down
responding.
into the basement having that knowledge from Christy and then going to find both of them, and that was, like, kinda what I was looking for in the episode too. It's like, are you gonna go straight in there and like, talk to the spirits that you have
Mhm.
known from Christy that are gonna be there? Or are you gonna try to, like, ask them, like, who is there and see if you can, like, match the same thing? But they kind of go right at Kevin
Yeah.
especially, and I just don't hear like Kevin got killed. I feel like I could probably make out the Kevin part, but the
Mhm.
rest of it I feel like is just too I don't even know, like maybe just like too convoluted for me, but at the
Mhm.
same time, like, we are hearing it through a digital recorder that is being placed in front of a microphone that's then being, like,
Yeah.
edited and digitized for us to be able to hear, so I'm sure
Yeah.
that if I heard the original one, it probably would
Mhm.
sound, like, much closer to that, but when I've just, like, kept rewatching it and rewinding it, I'm like, "Is that what it says?" And thought that it had said something different, but I just, like, couldn't make it out, but I
Mhm.
do make out the Kevin part, and I'm not always not saying, like, not always in, like, agreement with them, it's just that sometimes I don't always hear the same things that they hear, and I think
Right.
that my skepticism is because from watching Ghost Adventures for so long, and then they would have so many EVPs, and
Mhm.
half the time I'm like, "I don't hear that," like, and
Mhm.
to me, it was like, I think it can't be all of, like, the editing and all the things that it goes through on their episodes so much, and I don't really I feel like I don't really see that as often with Destination Fear or Project Fear, probably because 'cause they're, like, also debunking it or, like, they're just saying, like, "Oh, that's
Mhm.
unexplained." They don't try to always put whatever they think that it could be in there just to, like, make it
Mhm.
say something. But, yeah, this EVP, I'm just, like, a little bit skeptical on, but I'm sure
Yeah.
that it was much clearer if you were there.
Yeah, and that's, like, going back to what I just said about, like, when they put it on the screen, that just kinda, like, tricks your brain into thinking, like, that's what it is, but you don't hear that also, so sometimes, like, you have to, like, listen to it with your eyes closed and, like, maybe it says something else. Um, but it could be, like, interesting if Kevin was if that's what happened, and then Frank is kinda, like, stepping in and saying, like, he got killed since he was the enforcer kinda thing.
Right,
But,
it's like, you're not gonna be able to talk to him because I already took care of business.
yeah, like, he's not gonna answer it. And even Christy mentions that Frank doesn't like when you talk about Kevin.
Mhm.
So, whatever happened there, like, mob-wise, like, maybe in the spirit realm, like, Frank doesn't let Kevin talk.
Well,
Just like,
and,
"Don't be
like,
a snitch."
those things aren't discussed, right? It's like you
Mhm,
have a job, you do it, and then after that, it's like forgotten. That never happened. It didn't work out that way, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of like secrecy too, which I'm sure that
mhm.
Frank's not going to want to give up even in the afterlife. But they don't really
Yeah.
seem to get too much more down in the meat
No.
locker. So we end up panning over then to like the second floor where Chelsea and Tanner are, and they're in much more of like a dilapidated part of the hotel. Everything is
Mhm.
much more rundown on the second floor compared to the
Yeah.
other ones, and they're staring down this really long, creepy, dark hallway, and they can't even see the end of it. And I think that that puts them a little bit on edge. But
Mhm.
Chelsea thinks that it's a perfect place to do some rapid pictures on her phone, and she does. She reviews some of them, but they don't really reveal anything. So they end up sitting down at this table. It kind of looks like a staff break room type.
Yeah, the 2nd floor is super weird, like,
Mhm.
once they get out of the elevator, it doesn't look like a hotel, and it's the
Mm-mm.
2nd floor. Normally, like, 2nd floor, like, you'd see rooms or something, but it's like it looks like a business building almost,
Yeah.
this floor, which is super weird. I was like,
I
"What
feel like
the
it's
heck?"
like, when you have, like, your break room or, like, a locker room for
Mhm.
employees or something, I feel like that's kind of, like, the vibe that I get up there, or because it was probably one of, like, the most original floors of the hotel, it's
Yeah.
probably, more indicative of what it might have looked like back then, um, but when they sit at the table, that's kind of, like, the vibe that I got is, like, they are at, like, they're on their break, right? The staff that's, like,
Mhm.
on their break from their shifts or something. So they
Maybe.
decide to whip out the Ovilus,
Mhm.
and Tanner asks how many people are here, and he receives a response that said many, which makes sense for all of the spirits that could be in a 1,000,000 square foot hotel.
Mhm.
And at that time, they end up hearing, like, footsteps, like, coming down the hallway or something. Like, that's, like,
It's
what I was getting in my brain is, like, I just, like,
interesting.
heard a couple of them, or I think they think it's like, more of like just like a sound or like a knock or something, but I feel
Mhm.
like it's more like footsteps. And so then they go and like try to figure out like, hey, what is out there, but they can't really find anything. So they end up
Mhm.
going to a different floor, and even getting on the elevator, they're just so jumpy. And
Mhm.
Tanner even mentions, like, we are freaking on edge. And
Yeah.
one, the elevator is haunted, so you're going to be afraid anyway. But
Mhm.
two, it's really old, it's clanky. And part of it, like, when you were hearing these like big bangs and stuff, like against the elevator, I was wondering, like, are these just the noises of the elevator? Because it doesn't happen every single time that they get
No.
in there. So I'm like,
Yeah.
what was just it being old and operating really, weirdly, or
Mhm.
was there something on the other end of it?
Yeah, like, sometimes it sounds like someone's, like, knocking on the side of it. It's just like, but then at the same time, I'm like, is there something, like, stuck, like, on the side of it, making it, like it reminded me of, like, when you put a just like a card, like a playing card and a bike, and when the bike wheel spins, it goes like like, so
Mhm.
there was something like there, but then I'm like, I don't even know if I would trust that thing because 'cause you're being, like, held up by, like, this sketchy I've seen a lot of horror movies, people, like,
Right?
stuff happens in elevators. You either get stuck or that cable breaks, and us millennials, we have all been traumatized by Final Destination, and you know that freaking scene with the freaking logging truck. I'm
Oh,
just
yeah, as soon
saying.
as you started talking, that was instantly, like, the vision that came into my brain.
100%. And, like, elevators, they freak me out, like, not gonna lie, and even Dakota, like, every time he gets in that elevator, he, like, reacts to it. But, like, how do we know? Like, maybe something is messing with them,
Yeah, and it
and,
is the haunted elevator, so
a
you never know,
haunted
but I
you
think that
never
they
know.
do end up, like, giving it the benefit of the doubt that it's probably
Mhm.
just the mechanics of the
It's
elevator,
old.
so they don't
Mhm.
ever really wanna, I guess, like, more investigate the elevator per se. But after all of, their investigations separately, they do end up meeting up to debrief, and then, as usual, they'll switch places.
Mhm.
So Alex and Dakota head to the 18th floor, and they're working their way down, and then Chelsea and Tanner go to the basement.
Mhm, and then on the 18th floor, Dakota and Alex, they kinda, like, roam around a bit, and they notice a lot of broken glass of one of the windows, and this is reminding them that the people who have jumped to their deaths there, so there were a lot of suicides, so people would end up going to the top floor and jumping. Dakota keeps looking up though, thinking something is above them, and it almost sounds like there is somebody like walking above them, and he mentions like it's following them. So it's not like
Mhm.
from a distance, it's like they can really hear this. And then Dakota hears a noise and asks out loud if anyone is above them to make a loud noise. And then this noise, to me, like it also sounds like a door slamming.
Mhm.
And it's a big like boom. And then like literally right after they can hear voices talking. And it to me it sounds like two people are talking like it was really weird. And then they hear these voices, and Dakota tells Alex to kill his lights, thinking another person is up there because you never know if there's people up there. Um, and yeah, they like end up in a small room, but no one's there. They walk down the hallway, and Dakota asks the spirits to scare them out of there. He takes rapid pictures just on his cell phone down the hallway. Only seeing like there's like a small window at the end of this hallway with some light shining through from the outside. He doesn't review these at this time, but soon we'll see something that's captured.
And I'm, like, so glad that they didn't actually
Yeah.
review them in the moment, because they had already thought that there was, another person up there. They
Mhm.
roamed around, they found this room, the light was on, they were like,
Yeah.
"Let's go explore, like, into there a little bit," so they couldn't find anybody when they were on their sweeps. But I think that if they had seen what we're about to talk about, like, in the moment, I think that it would've been a lot scarier for them.
Oh, for
And I'm
sure.
surprised, because I feel like even though Tanner and Chelsea have been, together so far, I don't feel like they experienced as much activity as Dakota and Alex did for whatever reason. Like they go down to the basement and
Mhm.
or they're trying to go down to the basement, right? And instead, like the elevator
Mhm.
kind of just like has this mind of its own. Like we've talked
Yeah.
about, like it's known for doing that, and it actually goes to the second floor,
Mhm.
despite Chelsea actually hitting the B for basement, and she
Yeah.
films it. I don't know if she was like doing it intentionally, but like she
Yeah.
does get it caught on camera that like that's where they were going. So they start freaking
Mhm.
out as soon as they realize what's happened, and
Mhm.
they get into the basement. Chelsea starts saying like this is just kind of like out of a nightmare. I feel like she's anticipating what could maybe happen,
Mhm.
and they find the meat locker, so they're sitting in the basement. Tanner wants to whip out the ovulus, and they start talking about the mobster spirit Frank and his victim Kevin again. And
Mhm.
Tanner asks, like, did you kill somebody? And the ovulus says seven, and then
Mhm.
follows it up with business. So then Tanner makes that
Mhm.
kind of connection, like business meaning mob business. And he asked if they had a warning for him. And the response was quickly. So it's like, it was almost like the spirit was saying, yes, I killed seven people. It was business related, and I
Mhm.
do have a quick warning for you. And then before, like, they're kinda getting confused, right, about, like, what that
Mhm.
could mean, but
Yeah.
then Tanner's camera battery starts to die really
Yes.
quickly. So, even Chelsea is filming it at this point because I think, like, maybe 30 seconds later, it goes from, like, 22 minutes to nothing, like,
Yeah.
his camera actually dies, so they have to
Mhm.
leave, and Chelsea's just, like, starts running away, like, she's like, "Okay,
Mhm.
no, I'm done with this," and she's just, like, pitter-pattering her own little feet, and then the obvious is, like, outside, like, "I scared you out, or I pushed you out, or
Out
I
of the
did this
meat
thing that
locker.
made you leave," and
Mhm.
even when they're in there, though, like, they found, like, that kind of that, like, secret entrance to the
Yeah.
tunnel too, and I don't know because maybe Alex and Dakota did see it while they were down there, but, like, we it just wasn't part of the episode, but I
No.
think that, like, they got this when that was found, and for
Mhm.
me, thinking about it, it's like, if you found the secret to what was going on down there,
Mhm.
and I would want you to get out too before you exposed what my secret was.
Mhm. Oh, 100%. It was a weird meat locker. Like, there was other areas to it 'cause she finds that area with a hose. She's kinda confused about the hose, but it makes sense if, like, you're in a meat locker and you're, like, cutting up meat, like a butcher or, like, other body parts, you're hosing and cleaning everything down. But then there's, like, that random door that it says, like, we don't have access to, and there's tunnels. So it's like, why would that be connected to the meat locker? So
Right.
are we moving people, and where does that go?
Yeah,
Like,
that's true too.
horror movie stuff, people, I
Mhm.
tell ya.
Well, and talking about Vegas too, I had like no idea that there are like thousands of homeless people that live in the tunnels under Vegas. They have like this whole homeless community, and I think that we've talked about it on an episode at some point in time, or maybe we just
Maybe.
talked about it like on our own, but that's kind
Mhm.
of like what it reminds me of is like where yeah, like where does this go? Where does it come out at? Like who has access to these things? And I think that they're just as kind of confused as we are. And Alex
Mhm.
and or Tanner and Chelsea are like kind of taking their sweet old time in the meat locker. But at that point in time, Dakota and Alex are waiting for them, and they've already
Mhm.
returned to the gear room. And now Dakota is finally reviewing the pictures that he took earlier, and he notices that like I think he's taken like several photos, but after like right in the middle, after the first couple doesn't show anything, he notices this shadow figure standing in front of that window the whole way down at the end of the hallway, and so
Mhm.
he ends up enhancing the brightness and decreases the contrast so that you could see the shadow figure a lot better. And they kind of make
Mhm.
this red outline of what they think is the figure that they've noticed. And you can
Yeah.
almost see directly through its chest. So, like,
Mhm.
remembering they were on the 18th floor where both of those hotel managers had lived and had died in their respective times. So Alex kind of
Mhm.
thinks that like maybe it was one of the managers who died there of a heart attack because you can see through the chest. And I thought that was
Mhm.
kind of insightful too because I don't think I would have even thought about that.
I did not even think about that until he said it, because to me, I automatically see, like, hole in the chest, and I think of, like, a shotgun wound,
Hmm.
because it is about that size, and we do have, like, mobsters and stuff like that, and in close range, that can do some damage. So you never know, like, that could be it, but Alex makes, like, a huge point, like, maybe that spirit is showing itself and it's missing its heart because its heart was the problem. and had a heart attack. But, yeah, you can weirdly, like, and it almost does look like that shape of what a heart looks like
Mhm.
in a way, so maybe one of them, since there are 2 spirits that ended up having a heart attack on the same floor, so maybe one of them just, like, appeared to them, and maybe that was the one making the noises upstairs, and maybe since they heard those voices, maybe it was the 2 of them talking, you never know.
Yeah, it could have been, especially because it was much more for, like, the hotel managers to stay at too, but, like,
Mhm.
what a piece of evidence to review before you
Crazy.
start sleeping alone. Because normally they're not, like, reviewing those things unless they're, like, live reviewing the digital recorder or, like, they
Yeah.
do end up usually looking, like, at their pictures right after, but sometimes they find most of the evidence after the road trip concludes and they're going back
Mhm.
through all of their footage, so having that piece of evidence before they end up sleeping alone is probably making them a little bit more on edge,
Yeah.
and we kinda both had the same LOL moment, during the
So
sleeping
good.
arrangements because at first, some people are getting their sleeping arrangements first.
Mhm.
Dakota's on the second floor, and that's where Tanner and Chelsea had heard that disembodied voice. And
Mhm.
then Tanner's on the 11th floor. That's where they kind of heard that screaming and like you were saying about help me. And
Mhm.
then it's just left for Chelsea and Alex. And Chelsea realizing that she's just screwed no matter what she gets,
Oh
but
my
not knowing
god.
beforehand, like, even
Yeah.
though she saw them both get those locations and she just didn't remember. She's like, "Oh, I just don't want the 18th floor. I just don't want that." And then
Yeah.
they mentioned to her, like, "Well, the other thing is, like, the basement." And she's
Yeah.
like,
Just the her eyes go so wide, and she's like, "Oh, shit." Like, I don't want either one of them, and then she's got her, like, hand, and she's like, picks it, and then she just goes, "No!" And when she opens it, she gets the 18th floor, and I feel like this episode should have just been called Freaking Crud. Because when she says it a few times in this episode, it just made me laugh so hard. She's just like freaking crud, like 18th floor, and then Alex is realizing, dude, I get the basement.
Mhm. And none of them are really, like, super great sleeping locations. Like, I
No.
think, like, Dakota thinks that he lucked out, but he actually doesn't whatsoever at all, which really just goes to
Mm-mm.
show it's like you could get the easiest, right, sleeping arrangement, which I don't think any of them are particularly easy, but you could get like the
No.
easiest one and it might be the scariest of the whole night.
Yeah, because Dakota's probably thinking, like, finally, I don't get the basement, but he didn't explore the second floor, so he didn't really know what was going on there. Um, Tanner, though, being Tanner, he offers to switch with Chelsea because clearly she's upset about it. But I love that she declines this and she wants to commit to their process and avoids like altering anything because it's just like, well, if we let one person do it, then down the road it's going to be like, remember that time that I switched with you?
Mhm.
Um,
Props to
so
her because I
yeah.
think that if Tanner or anybody else would have offered her a very similar thing on
Hmm.
like even at the beginning of the road trip or in like Trail to Terror, the documentary, she would have
Hmm.
taken them up like
Yeah.
instantly, I think.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
she
for
had
sure.
asked too, even when they were doing the sleeping arrangement and like she's like, whatever you get, like I'll switch you. And so he does
Yes.
offer it and she still says no. So
Yeah.
I thought that that was like pretty big of her because she
Mhm,
does know what they just captured. Like she just saw the picture herself too.
mhm.
So knowing that that was just up there, knowing what they had experienced when they were there too, I think that it says a lot about her experience thus far. Like she's
Mhm.
relying on that rather than letting her fear really guide her.
Yeah.
And they end up all kind of like talking about their sleeping arrangements, right? Like what it has felt like to be in those ones, their like overall general thoughts, which I also think kind of like up the ante before they go there because they're giving all of the highlights of like all the terrible,
Yes.
scary things that have happened in these locations.
The highlight reel.
Yeah, but, like, a lot of stuff doesn't happen, like, right at the beginning of Sleeping Alone. It is
Mm-mm.
maybe a couple hours into it that around like 4:15 in the morning, Dakota hears this really loud bang. And it's kind
Mhm.
of like that clanging afterwards. And then as soon as like you hear that succession of sounds like we were talking about,
Mhm.
he instantly knows that it's the elevator.
Yep.
And again, he's on the second floor where it had actually went up to when they were
Mhm.
on the first floor gear room. It actually went up to the second floor with Chelsea and Tanner and when they wanted to go to the basement. So I don't know what the elevator in the second floor is, but he does notice that it stops there and
Mhm.
he radios Alex in this very scared voice and he's like, "Get up here, stat." And he's
Mhm.
freaking out. So Alex is running, he makes his way up to Dakota and Dakota's asking him in the meantime, and the spirit in the meantime is like, "Just leave me alone." And
Mhm.
I've never even seen Dakota really, right, be like, "You have to stay with me. Like, you need to sit
Mhm.
here." Usually it's like they'll just debrief and then they'll be like, "Okay, well, like, let's go back to our sleeping arrangements." But it was really hard for him to collect his composure at this point in the night.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny because when before this happens, they're getting Alex sitting down there and he's like, I really don't want to be in the basement. I can't believe I'm down here. So he kind of lucks out. We don't get anything really in the basement and he hangs out with Dakota the whole time. And it would be a bit freaky, like, experiencing that, though, like, the lights are also on in the elevator as well, and you can just, like, hear it. Like, you know that thing is opening, and once it opens and nobody walks out, it's like, "Oh, geez." So, yeah, we've got him and Alex together now sharing a cot. Alex is out of breath, just, like, getting up there because Dakota is, like he literally freaks out over this, and,
Mhm,
around like 4 like 52 a.m. we have Tanner and he hears footsteps and a loud bang in the opposite direction of the footsteps. So he's like looking both ways. He thinks a door was slammed and he starts to feel unsafe in this moment. It does kind of sound like a door slams almost. Um but yeah, but also with the elevator, we also have to remember that a maid's arm got ripped off.
mhm.
So my thinking was like maybe that was the floor it happened on, the second floor. We don't really know. But also the elevator likes to stop wherever it wants to. So maybe this night it just chose the second floor was its favorite spot.
Maybe because
And
it was, like, consistent, like, you know and I think that Dakota really gets, like, most of the action, and Alex is there for a lot of it. I think they end up going back to their
Mhm.
sleeping arrangements with, like, very little time for sleeping alone left, but,
Yeah.
Dakota ends up hearing some static, like, twice on his walkie, and then he hears, like, that clanging noise again, and it's the elevator again. So, like,
Mhm.
this time, Alex is there to witness what Dakota had witnessed before walking Alex in the first place. So they both see the elevator door opening and no
Mhm.
one was in there. Alex went to check it out and they kind of feel like almost like they may have like that Dakota may have like pissed something off. Like he doesn't really know, but that's
Mhm.
maybe what he's feeling like, right? Like something is like targeting him and
Mhm.
he doesn't really want to do it anymore. And Dakota even mentions like this is might be like my breaking point. And
Right.
that makes sense because in all of their experiences thus far, like, he has kind of been targeted. Like, I think each one of
Mhm.
them at some point in time has kind of been in that target range.
Mhm.
But I think Dakota, because he places himself in all of those situations, gets it just a little bit more. So that's
Mhm.
probably why I feel like his head goes to that, like, "Oh, I must have pissed something off, or I must have done something
Mhm.
wrong," even though that might not necessarily be the case, but I like that Alex was there to at least witness that.
Mhm. Yeah, like he had someone with him, and I'm glad we panned to the doors opening, and it's just like nobody's in there. Um, but yeah, like he automatically just feels like he pissed someone off, but I don't think so. I feel like in every episode he's very verbal about how he feels, and I think that his test for fear is true. Like he's saying it out loud, like how he feels. And I think spirits just react to that. Like they know. And during the same time, like we pan over to Chelsea on the 18th floor. She hears some movement at her location, another loud bang. It sounds similar to what Alex and Dakota were hearing. Um, when they were up there. So maybe it was just like one of the managers slamming a door. But other than that, we don't really get anything else. It was mainly with that elevator on the second floor with Dakota. So yeah, no other unexplained events happen, and they decide to peace out of there.
Right, I think Dakota was, like, just waiting to, like,
Yeah,
pack up his stuff and
I'm
leave. He
done.
was ready to go. I think that
Hmm.
if he could have, he probably would have left, like, even a little bit sooner, and I love
Hmm.
that they do some of their own final thoughts at the end of each episode. They kind of,
Right.
have this point of view, each one of them, and they get to summarize really what happened for them, and so
Hmm.
Chelsea underestimated the size of the location, and she was really surprised at how far she's come, but she also knows that she has a long way to go, and that's kind of what we experienced from her in this episode too,
Hmm.
especially when she declined the offer to switch. It was like, yeah, you know what, like, you have come a long way.
Yeah.
And Tanner reflected something that I found interesting too, is that, like, he felt like lonely, like bone
Hmm.
chillingly lonely during his time there. And you think about, like, every floor being like a suicide floor, that feeling of pervasive, like, loneliness and being lost and having no purpose. I think
Yeah.
that, like, that might have been what he was really feeling, because he mentions, he's like, I know that I'm going to be scared and I am still scared, but now I'm getting more comfortable with the feeling of being scared.
Yeah, and plus, like, Chelsea even says she can't even walkie Dakota when she's put into her location. She can only walkie Tanner. So she only had one person in contact. Even though, like, not a whole lot happened between those two on different floors, still, like, you're not hearing from anybody else the whole night, depending on how long you're sleeping for. So I feel like it would be lonely. You're like on a random floor in this huge hotel, like probably on edge the whole night.
It's the
Um,
biggest location that they've done in this season so far,
yeah.
and, like, you do have several floors in between you. If something does
Mhm.
happen, it may take somebody a lot longer. I mean, Alex, it was they were lucky, right? Alex was in the
They were
basement,
lucky.
Dakota was on the 2nd floor.
Yeah.
There was only a couple floors between them, but between Tanner on the 11th and
Mhm.
Chelsea on the 18th, that's 7 floors. So
That's
if
a lot of
something
flights of
happened to either
stairs.
one of them,
Yeah.
yeah, they would have, they were closest, but it would have taken a lot of time to be able to get there. And
Mhm.
I think that Dakota also underestimated this location just a little bit, because
For
he was
sure.
way more scared than he thought that he would be,
Yeah.
and he was almost embarrassed by his fear, because he did say, like, I think I'm gonna be done, like, I'm about to break. And
Mhm.
we don't really get to see that terribly often by
Mhm.
him. And Alex knew it too, experiencing that fear that he was feeling, and he was really in tune with Dakota's fears. So, and they all know, like, the next location is gonna be bigger and badder, because Dakota always tries to kinda, like, one up himself,
Yeah.
and they all know that they're also preparing for the end of the road trip, and
Mhm.
Dakota's going to leave the rest of the road trip to be locations that they're gonna need all of this experience for.
Mhm.
And that is the next location that they go to, one of my all-time favorites. I've been there numerous times, so if you guys wanna watch along with us, you can stream the season
Mhm.
on HBO Max and Discovery Plus. The next episode, they head to Moundsville, West Virginia to go to West Virginia State Penitentiary.
Yeah.
I am so stoked, because when I saw this episode first, I had already been there one time previously. And then when I've been rewatching it, now I've been there a second time for,
Mhm.
like, a specific, like, ghost tour. And for that reason alone, I loved watching it back again. And I know that they want to go back there at some point in
Mhm.
time in the Project Fear era. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about this next week.
Yes, I am so excited for this episode. And yeah, so if you like what you see, if you like what we are doing, please hit that like and subscribe button, comment just how you feel on the episode. Let us know if you do like what we're talking about, cuz we're going to do this every single Thursday, people. Get ready for Thirsty Thursdays at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And just we're gonna keep bringing it. Every week, we're going to be talking about Destination Fear, Project Fear down the road.
And we will see you next time. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.